But a more sinister breakthrough was with Amazon Alexa, a voice-activated speaker that interacts with your voice. Now this might seem like a seemingly simple and useful speaker, processing over 100,000 commands. However, this digital helper is a direct line to Amazon, where all your information is sent to the Amazon cloud. And I mean everything you say, everything you command Alexa to do has all been recorded and stored permanently. And this information is extremely valuable to Amazon. In fact, this is where Amazon makes its money from Alexa. I mean, of course, Alexa itself isn't the product. That's why the smart speaker is so incredibly cheap. It's also that every time people around the world talk to Alexa, Amazon makes a profit. And by doing this, smart speakers are now in 1 in 5 households across the US. And then the more comfortable you get with Alexa being a part of your daily life, the more information and thus the more money Bezos can extract from you and the population. And who knows what's actually happening with this data. But it might raise some concerns considering that Jeff Bezos sits on a Pentagon board, not to mention Jeff Bezos' $600 million deal with the CIA. Despite all the new markets Amazon was beginning to conquer, this didn't alleviate Jeff's temperament. In fact, his outbursts were only getting worse. He was known to regularly go ballistic whenever he deemed an employee not meeting his standards. All while he'd smile to the public looking like an innocent little nerd, but behind his fake laughs and smiling face was a monster. Many of those who received verbal lashings from Jeff noted that he flew into a rage so often that there would be a noticeable blood vessel bulging in his head during the tirades. The money Amazon was making also played no part in cooling Jeff's temper, as he was already a multi-billionaire by this point. However, billions weren't enough. Jeff wanted the world, and this would start to happen when the little-known Jeff Bezos would become a household name. During this time, Jeff would begin his first step into major company acquisitions, with his $250 million purchase of the then-failing Washington Post. Jeff saw that although the company was being run well in terms of physical newspaper distribution, they were really failing in the area of online delivery. Looking back now, Jeff's reasoning for acquiring the news outlets is fairly questionable, with him explaining that the advancements of the internet was, quote, eroding all the traditional advantages the newspapers had. And who knows what he really meant by that. But the Washington Post was now essentially a mouthpiece for Jeff to say whatever he wanted, using the legacy and trust the company had built up over decades. And while the company did start financially succeeding under his management, it certainly wasn't because of an improvement in journalism quality. Jeff's newspaper is almost entirely interchangeable with all the other publishing outlets that spout the same neoliberal agenda. Quote, think twice before changing the tax rules to soak billionaires. However, not all business magnates are created in equal eyes, according to the Washington Post, as Elon Musk's recent Twitter purchase is something Jeff Bezos could not abide by. According to the newspaper, billionaires acquiring media platforms is now something to be worried about, since they could soon start having too much influence over the public, which is true, but this is coming from Jeff Bezos. But even more unsurprising is that through Jeff Bezos' control of the Washington Post, he now also controls the mainstream narrative surrounding him. Because of course, the Washington Post can't criticize anything about Jeff Bezos or Amazon. Even writers for the Washington Post working for other media companies can't criticize Amazon.
There was a guy who was a writer for the Washington Post, wrote something in the Huffington Post that was critical of Amazon, and he got disciplined at the Washington Post for doing that.
Not to mention, Jeff Bezos has donated hundreds of millions to other major media networks like CNN and MSNBC, and by doing this, Bezos is always protected. Like for example, the time he cheated on his wife and began sending unsolicited pictures of his third leg. And after doing this, some of these photos were leaked. Now for any other person, this would get them cancelled or labelled as a creep, crushing their reputation entirely. But if you have enough money and power, the media comes to your defense. Like the legacy Watergate journalist Bob Woodward, passionately supporting Bezos, telling him how proud and supportive he is of Jeff, with the Washington Post literally creating an article saying Jeff Bezos stands his ground. In fact, me telling you about this incident might be the first you've ever heard of it, and that's because Jeff Bezos decides who the media attacks and who it praises. However, when it comes to independent journalists, Jeff is very happy to send his team to dox and censor them into silence. Like when Jeff's Washington Post were going to harass the family of the lady running the Twitter page, Libs of TikTok. Because at the time the Post couldn't find Libs of TikTok, they would actually harass her family instead, threatening her innocent family saying, quote, "You're being implicated in starting a hate campaign against LGBTQ people." The Washington Post published an article by Taylor Lorenz announcing Libs of TikTok's name, address, and real estate licensing information. So it starts to be pretty clear the other reason why Jeff controls so much of the media. It's convenient for Amazon hiding a lot of disgraceful and borderline illegal acts, which if the public found out, would destroy Jeff Bezos' reputation for life. I mean, the people fueling Jeff Bezos' riches live in dystopian squalor, with Amazon's working environment being highly toxic. I mean, the company literally encourages workers to snitch on each other over the most minor of differences. Amazon literally has a system called the Anytime Feedback Tool, which is an internal company phone allowing individuals to complain in secret to their managers. A system kind of like the Gestapo. By doing this deliberately creates a workplace culture of tension and mistrust, which is extremely useful for Bezos to prevent unionization, something Amazon does everything in their power to prevent. They have dedicated resources to prevent the formation of unions ever since the company's founding in 1994. This is accomplished by having employees under constant surveillance from inside the warehouses to private Facebook group chats being monitored by HR, and Amazon regularly holding meetings about why unionization would be bad for business. The company actually hires anti-union consultants and even posted job listings for intelligence analysts who can monitor labor organizing threats. Amazon is infamous for its anti-union propaganda, like this presentation they sent out to the whole company, telling workers to snitch on one another when they hear phrases like compensation, diversity, robots, or injustice. This is how little they think of the workers. And when workers aren't ratting on one another, if they make a slight error, Amazon's new wristband will track and buzz workers when they make the wrong movements. It's at a point now where Jeff Bezos thinks so little of his workers that he treats them like human cattle. Considering these conditions Amazon employees are put under, it's no wonder a majority of them are attempting to unionize. Their conditions are some of the most brutal you can find in first world countries. These Amazon factories are analogous to sweatshops. Amazon also has numerous warehouse cameras using an algorithm that analyzes the efficiency of every subordinate's actions. For example, if you're moving boxes, you better do it fast because a computer is monitoring your every move, calculating how much time is lapsed between each of the items you interact with. Or if you're driving delivery trucks for Amazon, things aren't much better either. Shift schedules are so strict that drivers are often forced to urinate in plastic bottles, all to prevent any clock time being wasted. At the start, Jeff Bezos used his media power to deny these claims, tweeting out things like, "You don't really believe the peeing in bottles thing, do you?" But after thorough investigation, Amazon was later forced to admit that the stories were true after multiple documents proved it. But even with the evidence coming out, Amazon avoided full responsibility by claiming the issue was, quote, industry-wide. But I don't think it is industry-wide. I really don't think most companies are using algorithms to analyze and rank each of its workers. And the algorithm is deadly. If a worker falls below a certain threshold in the algorithm, these workers are then automatically fired. And not even by a real person, but just by a computer. This is exactly what happened to a 63-year-old army veteran who was terminated over problems outside his control, like locked apartment complexes preventing him from making deliveries. And even with all I've just mentioned, this doesn't even include all the exhaustingly long shifts, considerably low break times, and workplace injury rates that are 3 times the national average compared to other warehouse occupations. But Jeff Bezos does this for a reason. By squeezing every drop of sweat from his workers, he can then reinvest this into gaining more and more control. That's why Amazon has been purchasing companies specializing in home security, pharmaceuticals, self-driving cars, grocery markets, facial recognition technology, airlines, and now even space travel. But Jeff Bezos isn't only conquering the physical world. By using Amazon's web services, Amazon now controls 90% of the internet, having full control of the switch for websites like Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. This is why when Amazon's web services go down, almost every other company falls down with it. I mean, there's so many companies that rely on Amazon at this point: Reddit, IMDb, Spotify, Pinterest, Imgur, the CIA, and over 80 other consumer brand websites. Despite the many platforms and businesses they provide for, this still doesn't stop Amazon from competing with them if it could turn a profit. This includes companies who rely on Amazon for hosting, as well as all those who sell their products through Amazon itself. A major example of this though can be seen with Netflix. Netflix, like almost all websites, use Amazon's web services. However, this is becoming very risky for Netflix due to Amazon setting up direct competition with Netflix through Prime Video. Music is another key industry the company is currently making steps towards, with Amazon Music now being a direct competitor to other services like iTunes and another platform they host, Spotify. Now you may be thinking, who would ever use that over iTunes and Spotify? But Amazon being an industry leader in voice recognition and virtual assistants means there is already significant potential. As we speak, there are people watching Amazon Prime Video while playing Amazon Music that's controlled by an Amazon Alexa they bought from Amazon.com, which of course runs on Amazon Web Services. All of this streamlining and centralization of products is why they are so intent on entering and cornering every possible market they can. Those who sell physical items through Amazon also have to deal with the company's company's massive influence, which allows them to dictate the cost of nearly anything being sold on the website. If pricing someone out doesn't work, Amazon can simply alter their search algorithms to benefit themselves and get the products they sell shown first. Because when it comes to competition, Amazon is absolutely ruthless. They have so much money that whenever another company tries to compete with them, Amazon can afford to sell at a loss until the competitor eventually runs out of business, making Amazon almost a monopoly. And despite this ethically questionable market strategy and the massive amounts of revenue the company generates on a yearly basis, they still consistently get tax cuts from the government. With these tax cuts happening, even though Jeff Bezos has gone on record in many occasions stating in interviews how hard he works to dodge taxes. I mean, have you ever wondered why Amazon was founded in Washington instead of California's Silicon Valley like almost every other big tech company? Well, Jeff has no problem admitting he did this entirely to avoid California's sales tax. And throughout the company's history, Amazon's aversion to paying tax has become central to their name. Over the 20 years they've been operating, Bezos has been deliberately avoiding sales tax in the majority of other states. In 2018, the company reported an all-time high of over $10 billion in profits, and yet they paid a grand total of $0.00 in federal income taxes. But I guess there are some benefits to Amazon's ruthless rise. I mean, workers at Amazon can now live in a wagey cage. At least Amazon provides its workers a meaningful lifestyle, where they can work in a box, live in constant anxiety of being fired, re-end their bottles, and then go back to their pod in a decaying dystopian megacity, where they'll be shuttled through grinding slow, packed public transport through a dangerous urban sprawl, only to repeat the cycle every day of every week of every month of every year, eating impossible Whopper burgers, ordering their foods, essentials, and gifts all through Amazon, where they'll go back to work in an Amazon wagey cage, being fed constant propaganda from Bezos' media empire, spending their only free time on an internet that's infrastructure is controlled by Amazon. Not to mention all the apps and major sites that Bezos partially owns, where an Amazon worker can then go back to watch their Amazon Prime while listening to their Amazon Music on their spying Alexa, paying taxes to a government that doesn't tax Bezos' inconceivable wealth, a government that actually begs Bezos to direct it. All of this to continue feeding Bezos' domination over you. And with our economy teetering on the verge of collapse, Bezos will then be able to buy up more businesses, more shares, more assets, and more wealth, becoming ever more in control of your daily lives, all while normal people are forced into factories treated like human cattle, fed continual propaganda. All of this just to keep the same system feeding Bezos' swollen ego. It's clear that we now live in a world where elected officials no longer control our economy or politics. The democratic vote no longer exists. How could it, when billionaires have control of the entire world's infrastructure, control of the CIA, seats at the Pentagon, spyware in millions of households, algorithms that dictate the market, and a personal fortune worth more than entire nations? Free market capitalism is no longer a unifying nation-building philosophy, because we've abandoned meritocracy in favor of socialism for the rich, laboring under a society and economic system that has now abandoned all of us.